the angler education program for MassWildlife. And typically this time of year, we're out and about doing in-person group programs throughout the entire state. We have about 100 instructors, and we do well over 100 programs a year. Sadly, everything came to a standstill, as we all know. For us, I haven't done a fishing program now since late February. I did an ice fishing program up in Chesterfield. Now, little did I know that was the last program in-person program I do this year. So we're adapting to virtual programs as well by trying these Zooms. We've been doing them for about a month and a half, and they seem to be going pretty good. We've had as many as 70, 75 people on one of them, and people are giving us some pretty good feedback. However, I still say it's kind of hard to impart confidence by doing a PowerPoint program on Zoom, but we're doing the best we can. This is going to be a bit shorter. Most of the ones we do are 2-hour programs, soup to nuts, beginner fishing, and family fishing. So I've pared this down to 1 hour, and I would welcome all the interaction, questions, comments, concerns, especially with a small group like this. It'll be very easy to do. So let me pull up my PowerPoint, and we'll kind of walk it through. It's not going to be totally death by PowerPoint. It's going to be, we'll also have, I'm going to take it down and show you some hands-on stuff as well. But this is pretty much the best way to walk through. So I've been doing this program for 25 years for MassWildlife, and that's your state Fish and Wildlife agency, agency responsible for managing, enhancing all inland freshwater fish and wildlife, both plants and animals. So a very tiny agency with a huge charge. I'm in the information education section along with the other education programs, and we're all trying to do the virtual thing now. So this is going to be like, I hope that you're not all expert anglers, because it was billed as a beginner walkthrough on fishing. So hopefully some people are novices, or you're just looking for some tips to take some people out, or you're just looking for other tips.
13.
What's that, Beatrice?
I haven't fished in over 50 years, so yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Beatrice, I was going to ask you, which of those two boats is going to be a fishing boat?
The Whaler. It has
awesome, beautiful. That would have been my choice. Excellent. Yeah. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. We're just going to walk you through, and I would encourage after, if for questions, and I can stay on longer, and or follow-up questions through email, and or you can I can give you my phone number too, and you can call anytime. Obviously right now we're pretty much working from home doing these programs, so I welcome as much interaction as possible without having the hands-on element that we're used to. So I've been doing the program. What's that, Beatrice?
That email.
Oh yeah, so I can give you the email, but you want me to do all that follow-up after? I'll give you the phone and the email after.
Okay.
And we can put it as a link. I'm sure Lindsay can send it out. I've got Lindsay's email. We've been going back and forth. I can just give her all that info, and she can email it to you guys too. So
thank you.
Yep, I'll put it in the chat right now.
Awesome. Beautiful. So with the 25 years I've been doing this program, I get the same recurring questions over and over and over from beginners. So I thought we'd frame this walkthrough with those 10 to 12 questions, and then I would beef it up with a little bit more information within those guidelines of those questions. So that's why I call, let's kind of go over the basics. When you get started, you want to have all your cards and ducks in a row. You want to know what you're doing when you're starting any pastime. So first thing is, everyone asks, do I need a fishing license to go fishing? And that would be a yes. If you're 15 years of age and older, you absolutely need a fishing license. And most states all states have this. Not all states are the same. So if you guys are state hoppers, you go in different states, you have properties in different states, just know those laws. A lot of them are 15, some of them are as young as 12. I think Vermont's 12, some are a little older, like 16. But in Massachusetts, 15 and up, you need to have a fishing license.
I got mine.
Awesome. It's free for a couple of demographics, and one of them is 15 to 17. If you get it, I'm going to show you where to get it. It's the best place to get it is on our website. There is an inconvenience fee, as I call it, a service fee of $1 or something. But if you come to our office and some of our vendors, it's free. But when you get to be 18 and to 64, the current cost is $27.50 for a year. It's based on a calendar year. You're a discount if you're 65 to 69, you're in the $16.25 category, and then 70 and above, it's free as well. I always get the question is, why do I even need it when I'm 70 and above if it's free? Well, we we always want to know our demographics. So the only way to know them is to have information about them. The only way to get information is to demand that they actually possess a license. So yeah, even if you're 70 and above, you still need to possess it, even though it is free, minus that pesky service charge if you buy it online at home. Non-residents, there is no, there's a straight $37.50 fee from the age of 15 and up. Saltwater, we might as well talk about saltwater a little bit as well. That's $10 from age 16 to 59. That was put in place about 10 years, actually through George Bush too. So Bush 43 reauthorized the Magnuson Act in the mid-twos, 2005 or 6. And with the federal government taking a fee if the states didn't jump in and take the fee. And the fee is for surveys. So the Division of Marine Fisheries in all the states used to survey people on their fishing in saltwater, so to get some kind of a sense of what they were fishing for and catch rates and all that. But they would just literally go through the white pages of the phone book and randomly do it that way. So this fee allowed them to actually build a survey for people that actually fish. So now it's a lot more targeted to the people that actually utilize the resource. So that's what that money goes to. So each state has it. Some states waive it if you have a freshwater license. It's if you have one in Massachusetts, it's good up and down. All the it's good in New Hampshire, Maine, Connecticut, Rhode Island, I think New York. So all our contiguous land states. It's $10 from age 16 to 59. 60 and above, it's free, and until you're 16, there's no fee.
Okay.
These are all based on a calendar year. So if you have either one of them now, you got till the end of December. And there are some free fishing weekends if you want to try before you buy too. Sadly, they're both gone now. Freshwater free fishing weekend is the first full weekend in June, and saltwater is always Father's Day weekend, a couple weekends after that.
Nice.
Yeah, so do you need a license to take your child or grandchild fishing? What do you folks think?
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of a yes, no, maybe. It just depends, and I'm going to show you why.
Yeah.
It is absolutely good to, to have a license just in case, but the fishing is defined, and it's not well defined, in my opinion. We need to, ourselves and the environmental police who actually enforce the laws need to define this better. It's defined under the Massachusetts general laws as fishing with a hand line or rod baited with natural artificial bait. So they say fishing or angling, and then they just say fishing. So where is the line, right? So we talked to the environmental police to actually enforce this, and they tell us that taking into account the definition, you don't need a license to help put bait on, to untangle their line, to take a hook off the fish. But the minute you grab that fishing line and cast it for them or reel it in if they're having difficulties, now you're in control of the rod in reel, so you would technically need a license. Environmental police will encounter a lot of people and field this question a lot, and if they're just helping, even if they've got the rod in the hand, sometimes they'll gently say, you need to go get a license if you're actually partaking in it by controlling the rod. So I want them to, my wish is to have them define it a little bit better, right down to the point where they say in control of the rod, and that's how they're working it when they're actually out there on the job. They're not going to bust anyone unless they're actually just sitting there fishing for the grandkids. So you're good. If the child knows how to fish well and you're just supervising, then you're fine, helping them here and there. But a lot of the little ones, 3, 4, 5, and 6, they get bored. They throw the rod down. They want to skim stones, and that's wonderful. They should just enjoy being outside. And then you pick up the rod and say, I wonder what this is like. Then you're in control of the rod. Or they have a hard time reeling it in and weeds, and you're reeling it in for them. So now you're in control. So that's kind of the defining line. And it's been that way forever. We just recently contacted our sister agency, environmental police, and that's exactly what they still do. They only if you're actually controlling it and fishing mostly on your own that they're gonna say anything to you. Where can you purchase a fishing license? Well, the best places in the convenience of your own home, right where you are now. You just go onto our website. I'm going to walk you through the website. Quick little virtual tour in a few minutes here. But that's really the best place. You will have to use a credit card, and you will have to have a little inconvenience fee, especially if it's in the free category. But then you don't have to worry about our vendors. Our vendors are, there's mostly, Walmart, Dick's, Bass Pro Shops, Cabela's, some town departments still do it, but most of them don't. So a few mom and pop small bait and tackle shops do as well. but mostly those bigger box stores. And right now, given COVID, their resources are kind of limited, so I'm not even sure a lot of them are selling it. So that's why we encourage people just to get it right online at home, and I'll show you how to do that in a bit. And three of you might already know how to do that, so we don't have to delve into that too much. What equipment do you need to get started in fishing? Well, contrary to popular belief, you don't need a heck of a lot. The aforementioned fishing license, you absolutely have to have. Simple rod and reel combination, and I'm going to show you that a little more shortly here. You don't need to spend the life savings on getting into fishing. A few hooks and bobbers, which is terminal tackle, something to put on the end of the line, and then some yummy bait. You got to have something to put on the end to attract the fish, and nothing really beats live bait. Rods and reels that I'd recommend you start with, and there are 4 types. The 2 that are checked are probably the best to start with. So the spin cast or push button rod and reel on the upper left is the number 1 dynamite, easy peasy rod and reel to use. The one that most people graduate to is the spinning or the open face rod and reel. I'm going to show you the 2 of those. The 2 that you definitely, if you haven't fished before or you don't have any mentors, you don't want to start with a bait casting rod and reel or a fly rod and reel. Those are level up. And like I say, unless you have someone showing you specifically, you take a class on that, and we do actually separate classes on fly fishing and specialty fishing, then you don't want to mess with those because it could discourage you from actually fishing. Give you a quick little anecdote. There was a movie that came out back in the 80s called The River Runs Through It. Wonderful tale of like a Cain and Abel tale of a good brother, bad brother. Brad Pitt starred in it. And the family got together. Father was a minister. They got together over fly fishing in Montana. Talk about a beautifully set film and romantic. And there's nothing that beats, showing the movement of a fly rod and reel through the air, the fly going through the air and hooking the fish and the fish jumping. Well, people watched this. It was one of the most popular movies in the mid-'80s. People watched it and went out and bought a fly rod to start fishing. They had never fished before. Ooh, that was a big mistake. That's a specialty. It's a lot harder to use. You need little bit more knowledge. You need someone really showing you firsthand how to do that. So what happened, the fly fishing industry loved it because they sold a bazillion rod and reels, but people got frustrated and actually thought that was fishing, and then they stopped partaking in the pastime. So you want to backtrack, you want to walk and crawl before you can run. So you really want to start with the 2 top, so the push button and the spinning. I'm going to walk you through how to cast those. We're going to drop the PowerPoint down in a second. I'm going to show you those a little more detail, how to cast them. Proper hand positioning is key with any rod and reel and any pastime. You want to start the right way. So the spin casting rod and reel, the push button on the lower left here, you want to hold it with the reel sitting on top of the rod, not vice versa, like you see on the crossed out one to the right. A lot of people you'll see fishing that way, and it's just really awkward. The rod is designed to have the reel sit on top, and it's strongest with it that way. If you fish it underneath like that, all rods are splined, so they have a strong point and a weak point. So the weak point would be fishing it in reverse, and you might lose a fish or break the rod if you do it that way, and you're reeling it in backwards too. And I'll show you. So that wouldn't be a smart move. The spinning rod and reel, what most people and adults graduate to, although I have to say my wife still uses the push button when we go fishing. She loves it. It's easy peasy. And there are some professional bass tournament folks that use the push button rod. So it's not just for kids, but it is the one most young people start with. And then they go to the spinning rod and reel, and then a lot of people never go beyond that when you don't really need to. It's a great tool. It just takes a little more hand-eye coordination. It's a little more difficult, and things can go wrong a little easier on that one because there's less containment of the line, and I'll show you that. So I'm going to stop the share for a second. And I'm going to show you those tools.
Okay.
So this is, if you have young children, and I would say under 6 or 7 probably, these are the short little versions, 3.5 foot rod and reels, all in the push button, mostly the push button spin casting. This is what you want to focus on. When they're real young, when they get to be 8, 9, they're taller, they don't need to use these little tiny ones. A lot of them still like to, and you'll see them using the SpongeBob and the Barbie and all those little plasticky push button ones. This is a cut above. These are little Zebco Dock Demons, a really good strong rod that you can almost bend completely in half. The reel's pretty good too. So this was probably $15 as opposed to the SpongeBob one that's $5 to $10. Has a little bit more metal components, a little tougher. But once they get to about 7 years old or so, they really can handle the full size 6 foot push button spin casting rod and reel. And that's the one that most people start with, even beginners. And like I say, even my wife likes to use it now because it's just so gosh darn easy. So this is the part that we're talking about, the push button right here. So you're gonna hold it with the reel up, not down, like I said. Otherwise, everything is backwards, including reeling in is backwards. So you want to hold it with the reel sitting up. The thumb is the thumb button is your control right there. You want to put your forefinger on the trigger guard. You want to push and hold the button when you first start up. Then you want to bring it either over your shoulders or off to the side, depending on what you're comfortable with. You bring it over your shoulders and kind of stop, come forward fast. And when you get it forward, you lift your thumb off the button. You see a lot of people just trying to tap the button quick as they go forward. And then if you miss that timing at all, your bait is going to land at your feet or going to go up and land on your head, come back down. So really you want to push to start, bring it back, pause for a second, come forward fast and lift your thumb when you get it fully over your shoulders. Or if you're going sidearm, you can do the same kind of motion. And just when you get it forward, you lift your thumb off of it. And what's on the end, I only have a half a rod here because my ceiling height and the ceiling fan would prevent me from actually using the whole rod. But these are the guides. The line's going to go up through the guides. And then you're going to have the weight of what's on the end is really going to propel it out. A little of your ability and a lot of what's on the end for this rod and reel.
And what brand is that one?
What's that?
What brand was that one, please?
Oh, yeah. I sound like a honk for Zebco, but we use Zebcos because they're some of the most durable ones. But Shakespeare makes them, Garcia, Daiwa, they all make decent ones. We get some of our best prices from Zebco. So this is Zebco 33. If you go to Walmart or Dick's, you can get them probably for $20 to $25. We get them severely discounted because we buy them in bulk. And they're one of the companies that really works with us. So yeah, Zebco 33, that's a good one to start with. Nothing to it. There's your handle. So if you're a righty, I'm a righty. And so I cast with my right, then I switch it to my left hand and I reel with my right hand. But you could also just, if you're a lefty, you can take this, there's a little set screw here. You remove that, you can put the handle on the left side and the screw on the right side now if you're a lefty. But a lot of righties like to use it that way too. They cast and they can just turn the handle on this side. So I tell people, whatever you're comfortable with, don't hold it upside down and reel it backwards. But if you're holding it right way, whatever you're comfortable with doing is what you should do. There is a tension on this. It's called the drag. On all rod and reels have it. even a basic fly reel, which is really basic to hold the line, will have it for the most part. But this is just drag, which is tension on the line. So if I pull this all the way to the right, the line won't come out at all. But if I go way over to the left here, like you heard, the line will come out. And the purpose of that is if you hook into a big fish, a really big fighting fish, if you have the drag all the way tight, that fish might just snap your line right off. So if you were to have it kind of in the middle where they can play themselves, you can still fight them, but they can exhaust themselves a little bit so they won't break the line. That's kind of the way to go when you start. Then if it's a little fish, you can just put this all the way over and then they can't pull any line out anyways. But it's always best to start kind of in the middle of the tension setting. And a lot of these rod and reels have a bait alert as well. So that's just a little button somewhere near the handle. Sometimes it's a click under the handle. But what happens then is if the fish bites, you'll hear that. So if you set this down on your boat or against the shore, just lean it and you hear that, a fish is biting. So then you would click that button back over and pick up the rod and set the hook and hopefully catch the fish. So that's just one. Not all rod and reels have it. Some do, some don't. But particularly the better spin casters do. And it allows lazy fishing. You just put the rod down. You can sit and sip your favorite beverage on a hot day and just wait till a fish bites. If you're not using a bobber, if you're using a bobber, I'll show you that after. Then you can see visually if a fish is biting. But this allows you to fish in deeper water without using a bobber, and you'll know if a fish is on. So that's
the eyelets are on the same side as the reel. The eyelets.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And does it come with the line on, or you put the line on yourself?
Great question. Who's asking this? Is this Mike?
Yes.
Hey, Mike. So yeah, great question, buddy. So yeah, you're lucky because most years ago that you'd buy the reel separate, the rod, you had to know a little bit more about how to match them. Nowadays, they come with a rod and reel together with the line. The line's usually just right there on a little plastic tab. So you have to click the push button and bring it up through the guides first and rig it yourself. But basically, that's so simple. The reel is already attached to the rod and it's matched perfectly because you want to match the reel with the rod. If you happen to get someone giving you a rod and reel, or just a rod or just a reel, most rods are going to have markings. These are just, they're going to have markings that indicate the line and the lure size and the action. So if it's called light action, it's going to be for smaller fish, panfish, small trout. If it's medium action, it's a good range from small fish all the way to really big fish. If it's heavy action, it's good for, say, striped bass, bluefish, bigger fish, saltwater fish, or big trout. So it's going to say that on the rod. It's also going to say the line size. And line has a breaking strength rating on all monofilament line, which is going to come on the rod, on the reel loaded. And usually 6, 7, 6, 8, 10 pound is what you're looking for breaking strength if you're just a beginner. If you're fishing for tiny little panfish for bringing home to eat, or small trout, then yeah, 2 to 4 pound is good. They put it on a machine, and that's what it breaks at, so that's what they put the breaking strength at. But if it's rated for 10, 12, 14, then that's for some really big fish. But keep in mind the diameter is a lot more, and you have to put a lot less on the reel if it's heavier line. So that's pretty easy. Monofilament line is pretty much what's loaded on most all rod and reels except fly rods. Fly rods have their own dedicated line, so we're not going to get into lines today because we could do a whole class on those. But for beginners, you're going to get a reel that's loaded with line. The correct line is going to match your rod, and you're going to be good to go. And you just need to know what to put on the end, and we're going to show you that. So that's your push button. The next one is your spinning rod and reel, and that's the one that is held under. You have the post. You have all the same components, they're just larger. So you have the bail in the spinning rod and reel. The bail is inside with the bail pins, and the cover just kind of contains the line a little bit better from kind of giving a big old poof in a bird's nest sometimes when it's really been sitting for a while. So you'll have the bail right there. You'll have the spool, the drag, tension on line is right on the front on this one. The only other place it might be on the spinning reel is in the back. It's just a knob that you put the tension up or down. And with this one, you're going to hold it. You're going to put your fingers between the post, holding the reel down. This is the large part of the bail is right there. So you want to wind that up under your forefinger. You're going to grab the line like that. Physically flip the bail over. That's why I said there's a little more involved. That's like depressing the button on the spin cast or the push button rod and reel. And you're just going to do the same exact motion. Bring the rod back, come forward, and let go. Just lift on your finger, and that line should take right off on you. Again, that and just lift your forefinger as you're coming forward. And then you physically usually just push that bail down and start reeling. And the best thing to do when you cast it, you reel it till the line's kind of tight. And so you don't miss a fish. If you leave all that loose line in the water, the fish are going to grab it, and by the time you pick it up, the fish might have already taken off. If you have a nice tension, you can see that bobber bounce up and down the water, and the line is tight to it. You pick the rod up, and you pretty much set the hook. It's a lot easier that way anyway. So that's the two. Troubleshooting usually comes into play when the line just kind of gets all tangled up, and that's fairly normal if it's been in it. That's the one bad thing about monofilament, by the way. The two bad things, it's plastic, and it doesn't degrade in the environment, so never just throw it out there and leave it, even by accident, because birds love it for nesting material, and it can cause all kinds of problems in the environment. In the sunlight, it'll degrade in a couple hundred years, but usually stuff covers it up, piece will hang out, the bird will see it. And I've got some really sad slides showing what happens. I don't know if I included them in this PowerPoint, but it's pretty sad. So take the fishing line out with you, pick up other people's. Some people are slobs, they just leave that ball up on the ground. Take that out with you if you have an extra pocket or a tackle box or bag. But the monofilament is great otherwise. It just has good stretch, comes in a variety of colors. It's very inexpensive, but it does tend to like to be in the position it was in and has memory. So when you first take it out, when you first start, have someone or tie the end to a tree and walk it back 100 feet, pull it tight to get that stretch out of it, and then reel it in slowly, or even have someone walk it out, and you can just reel that person in slowly and get that stretch out. The other thing you can do, they make little spray oils, environmentally friendly spray oils you can spray on the line to soften it up, to take that memory out, or you can just take the whole spool off. This comes right off. You just take the drag, loosen the drag all the way to the end, this will come right off. You can just soak it in some room temperature water overnight, and that softens it up too. If you take it right out, like it's been in your closet all winter, you take it out and use it, it's just going to be all kinked up, and that's when you're going to have some of those tangles. And don't panic over the tangles. You're always going to get tangles. Just use a couple of things you really should have. Just bring a pair of toenail clippers, clip the line, put it back up through the guides, and start over again. Don't get all flustered by that fact. So those are kind of the two most basic rod and reels you're going to encounter. We would have to have a whole class for the bait caster because it comes off entirely different very fast, and it's a specialty rod and reel used by professional anglers or people that want to cast really far and accurate. But the trouble is, if you're not precise with it, the line just tangles up so fast, and then even the pros get tangles about every 15 or 20 casts, so it can be pretty frustrating. And then the fly rod and reel, there's separate classes for that as well. So those are the basic kinds. I'm going to go back into the PowerPoint here, continue that journey. Always a little slow to respond. So you've got your rod and reel, whichever one you selected of those two, hopefully, and now you need something to put on the end so you can actually go fishing and catch fish, and that's called terminal tackle. Terminal meaning what's on the end. And if you're just starting out, I'd recommend bait fishing over lures. So you want to start with three things: the hook, the bobber or float, and a little bit of weight, especially if it's a windy day. You got a lot of wind in your face, you want a little more weight to get it through the wind. Some of the bobbers you can see right here have weight already on them. So that kills two birds with one stone. Getting to hooks though, the anatomy of a hook, this is the business end of it, the 2 points, the point and the barb. The point's going to go through the fish, and the barb's going to hold that hook into the fish if you've got a good hook into them. If you're practicing only catch and release, I'd recommend removing the barb, because all you really need to hold the fish is good tension on the line while you're fighting the fish in. The barb is just it's one extra point. If you're keeping the fish to eat, I would keep the barb on, because you're gonna sacrifice the fish for your dinner anyways. But if you're not doing that, I would take the barb and crimp it down with a pair of pliers, little needle nose pliers. You can just crimp that barb right down. And I've got a hook to show you here. You can see it. Probably can't quite see the barb on it. And I've actually taken the barb off this one already in an example, but you would just put the needle nose pliers on that barb right there and just crimp it right down. It'll smash it down. And you can also take a nail file, and there's a file on a lot of decent fingernail or toenail clippers, and you can just file it down. This way too, it's for safety. If you get it under your skin by accident, and that happens, especially if you're fishing tight to people that aren't paying attention, it'll hurt, but it'll come right out. It'll slide out. If you have the barb in, it's not going to come right out, and that can be a trip to the emergency room or the clinic to have it removed. Or if you know someone with some tricks to remove it, I've had to remove it at clinics before. At our fishing clinics in person, and it's not my favorite thing to do. So that's why we even use barbless hooks in all of our programs. But some people bring their own rods and they don't. So then usually it's brother and sister, or a couple of friends fishing a little too close, taking each other for granted, not paying attention, that hook each other by accident. A lot of times just in the arm or the leg or something relatively innocuous. I've been hooked a couple times in my years doing the program. Nothing serious, but it does always wake you up to the fact that you got to pay attention all the time. And thankfully, most of our programs, we take the barb off, so the hook slides right out, and then you just clean it up. And if it's for children, they like to put a Band-Aid on, but you don't need to unless it's in your face. Face or scalp can be kind of bleeders, so you just put some antiseptic and a little bit of a Band-Aid on it, stop the bleeding. But that's worst case most of the time if you're just live bait fishing. And it happens so infrequent. It's only happened maybe a half dozen times in my 25 years. So just keep your eyes up and always use polarized sunglasses. I'm going to show you the basic accessories. That's for safety. So that'll keep hooks out of your eyes because you never want them there. So you got your hook on, and we're going to show you three kind of basic knots you can tie them on. We're not going to have time to go in depth on them. I'm just going to show them to you, and then hopefully lead you to the right place to learn how to do them, because you want to have one or two go-to knots to be able to put that hook on. So after you've gotten your hook tied on, and a couple of the knots are so simple, you can tie it on in like 30 seconds. And then you're gonna put a float on. That's one of these if you're fishing in the top 2 or 3 feet of water. And I recommend it if you're a beginner. So you can have a nice visual of where your line is and if a fish is biting. So if you see that bobber, which is nothing more than a little round float going up and down in the water, it goes under the water, you know full well a fish is biting or has got your bait and hook in its mouth, and you want to be using the tool right here, which is a circle hook, the best hook you can use. You generally just let the fish swim with it a little bit and then slowly start reeling. If you're using one of these older style, longer shank, Aberdeen or Carlisle or bait holder hooks, you would then let the also let the fish go until you see the bobber completely down. That means the fish is convinced it's a meal, and then you're going to bring that rod back and set the hook in the fish's mouth. And a lot of people love that. They love that act of doing that and being more involved. But if you use a circle hook, you just let them swim, 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 and then start turning, and it usually just catches the fish in the upper lower jaw. That's the way that hook is designed, and about 75 or 80% of the time it actually does that. So it's pretty cool design. So after that, you put the bobber on, you put the hook on, then if you want a little weight, especially if it's windy or you just want to cast a little bit further, you take this kind of weight right here, a little split shot sinker, and you attach it right under the bobber, kind of the way you see these right here. Attach it right there so the fish don't see it, and it gives you that little bit of weight to get it further out in the water column. Those are the big three. The other one is swivels. Swivel is something you can attach to the end of your line if you're using lures or snelled hooks. Snelled hook is just a hook with a little bit of monofilament and a loop already on it, so you just clip that on and you're good to go. I use it with lures because some lures spin your line and the line gets all twist, but all swivels have a little ball bearing, so they keep your line from getting twisted. The lure will twist, the ball bearing will keep your line from getting all twisted up. So it's good thing to use. And there's a clip on the end, so if you want to keep changing lures easily rather than cutting your knot and retying the lure on, it's a little easier to go. So kind of those are the four you should have in your terminal tackle box. Small amount of each in the rod and some bait, whatever you want to use for bait. There's your knots right there, and I just threw the ones out that I use on a regular basis. The clinch knot, the improved clinch, and the Palomar knot. They're all very simple to tie, even though in this demonstration, or if I was to try and demonstrate it right now, it wouldn't seem simple. You have to actually have I recommend going to YouTube, and there's other virtual venues too that you can use besides YouTube. YouTube's just the most popular one, and just typing in fishing knots, and boy, there's a bazillion videos, and you can just sit there like you're watching me right now and watch him a few times tie it, him or her. There's a lot of women doing it too, and then you can just imitate it with your hook and fishing line, or just practice with anything, basically a bit of clothesline and something with a round loop in it. When we do knot tying classes, I use little wine corks and little screw eyes I just put right in the end, and it's a lot safer. You don't have the point, and then we just practice. When we do in-person classes, we spend about a half hour, 45 minutes tying a few different knots. And even then, those people don't go away knowing how to tie knots yet. We always tell people, go home and practice, learn how to tie one or two good terminal end knots, so you can almost tie them with your eyes closed or in your sleep, so you're not fumbling around when you're out there. You can't get away with just using a granny knot, like, the old overhand knots you use to tie your shoes, because fish will pull right through them and the line will break. So you want an actual dedicated fishing knot. And the clinch knot's one of the easiest. Simple knots, you can tie it, like I say, after you get good at it, within 10, 15, 20 seconds. The improved clinch is just one step beyond. You're just going to put that, instead of just going through the first loop, you're going to go through the first loop and back through the big loop. Palomar, you just make a loop in your line and go over the hook and pull it. You'll see if you watch the video, it's pretty easy. Those are kind of some of the three easiest ones and strongest ones. There's knot geeks out there that rate knots, and the strength rating of these three are some of the highest ones. But there's a ton of different knots, and they're being invented all the time. You go online and you'll see. So find one that's easy for you to tie, and just learn how to tie it. Practice it a little bit before you go fishing. You should practice casting a little too, I'd say. Once you get your rig worked up, just try and cast it in the lawn before you go out. Fishing accessories, you should, at the bare bones, you should have a few things. You don't need a lot, but I showed you two of them already. You definitely want some way to get a fish out of a hook, and or crimp a barb down in some way to clip your line. So a little fingernail, toenail clippers. And I also showed you the glasses. The glasses serve two purposes, folks. Safety, number one, when you have hooks swinging around, and number two, so you can see into the water, see the fish better. polarized. Polarized sunglasses knock the glare down, and you can literally see in the water and see the fish swimming around, see the habitat they live in. So those three, and they're not, none of these are expensive. They're all 10, 50, the clippers are $1, the needle nose pliers are $2 or $3, the glasses are 10 or 15. If you're fishing in a watercraft, which I know, Beatrice, you are, right? You're going to fish out of your boat. So you're definitely going to have a life jacket on or handy. The law states that if you're in a canoe or kayak from September 15th to May 15th, you actually have to have it attached to you. A lot of people break this rule, and they're only potentially hurting themselves. And that's all about water temp. So between September 15th and May 15th, the water temps dip down to a level that's really unsafe to be in for more than 5 to 10 minutes. So if you had a life jacket on, it gives you the ability to stay afloat better and get to shore if your vessel capsizes. But even in the summer, if you're not a really strong swimmer, I'd recommend just having it on. And this is the old style, the heavier version. They make them lighter and lighter now, and they make even the ones that have the little CO2 cartridges attached. It's just like a skinny little vest that weighs, half a pound. You don't even know you're wearing it. So even in the heat of the summer, they're a little more expensive. Those are like $50, whereas the old style ones like this are $20, $25. So I get it. But on a hot day like today, I wouldn't even want to be wrapped in one of these. So I'd probably be sitting on it, but I'd have it handy if it was right, if I was in any vessel. And of course, nowadays with West Nile and Triple E, you want some, mosquito or insect repellents handy, especially if you're fishing early or late, which is a good time to fish. And of course, sunscreen. Sun's never been stronger. Accessories that would enhance the experience, but you certainly don't need, or some way to, if you're going to keep the fish and bring them home to eat, some way to keep those fish fresh until you leave the water body, some way to measure the fish if you're into, bragging about the weight or the length or just curious, some way to clean the fish. Fillet knife will clean it or fillet it. Sadly, we can't demo that either unless we're in person. A net to scoop the fish in, especially if you're out of a boat. It's really handy to have a net. Some way to gain more access to the water. So hip boots give you up above about mid-thigh high, just above the knees. Going to give you a few feet of water to walk out into, and chest waders right up under your armpit so you can walk out belly to chest height, and gives you a lot more access to the water. Just know the water, obviously, before you go in. Don't go in without testing it first and going slowly. Canoes and kayaks and boats are all wonderful. And if you have one, and I know you do, Beatrice. It is Beatrice, right?
Yep.
Beatrice has two. So the old adage, the best day in a boater's life is the day they acquire the boat and the day they get rid of the boat, because of the work involved. And the other adage for a boat is break out another $1,000, because you're either working on the boat or working on the trailer. So, and I'm guilty of that too. I may use my boat 6 to 8 times a year, and I probably work on it 6 to 8 times a year. So there's always something to be doing on them, especially with an old wooden boat.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know that. So do I have to use live bait to go fishing? And a lot of people have an aversion to live bait. And it's completely understandable. You're putting something alive, you're impaling them on a hook. So the answer to that is an absolute, whoa, I don't know what I did there. So the answer to that is an absolute no. You don't have to use live bait. The texture, the smell, the movement, all the things that make it kind of gross for certain people, make it a wonderful bait. It's what the fish know. They eat things alive in the water. Worms are always falling in the water. Larvae is always falling out of trees. Smaller fish are always passing by, so they know that, so they're going to be familiar, and that's going to be their go-to. But if you don't want to put something alive on a hook, by all means, you do not need to. Cheese, chicken, hot dogs, bread will all work just fine, especially, little dense pieces of that, like hot dogs with a thick skin, or uncooked chicken that's still pretty dense, or cheese sticks will work just fine. Boiled up bread probably won't work as good as is live bait, but it'll still work. It'll still get you into fish. And then fishing lures. If you know the right lures, they work well too. But the only problem for beginners is it's so expensive, and you just don't know which ones to start with. It can be so confusing. So we don't recommend people run out and spend their life savings on a bunch of lures that look good to them. In terms of putting on a live bait, here's the big three that we use most of the time. So we're using mealworms, and mealworms are called mealworms because a lot of times you'll open old flour or cornmeal in your cupboards, and this is what you find. You find these little guys crawling around. They come in, there's eggs in that flour or meal, a lot of it you don't realize, and after 2 or 3 years they will hatch out and you'll find little worms in your cornmeal. And these are darkling beetle larvae, but you can buy them in the store. I wouldn't bother culturing them. They're so cheap. You can just go to any pet store and get them because people feed their get lizards, reptiles, amphibians, and birds. You can buy them live. You can buy them dead. Either way, they work pretty good for fishing. I'd say live works better, obviously. They're small little 1.5 inch darkling beetles. Their mouths are so tiny they can't bite you, but the people are grossed out because they crawl. They're little 6 little legs like all insects that keeps people out. And on a warm, sunny day like today, they're very active. So they're moving around a lot more. If it's colder out, 40s and 50s, they're barely moving. They almost seem dead when you put them on the hook. So those work really good. You can keep them in the refrigerator in a cool place for a long period of time. If you keep them in the heat, they'll pupate and then metamorphose, like all insects have that metamorphosis ability. They'll metamorphose into a darkling beetle. And that's a little brown, nondescript, harmless beetle that's non-flying, but it'll scurry around, and some people will, oh my God, I have cockroaches in the house. And it's just a little brown beetle. So if you let them out, if you keep them in the heat, that'll happen. The other thing is the standard worm, and there's so many different species of worms, from the ones you find right in your garden to the skinny ones in the compost pile to the big old 6 and 8 inch big old earthworms called night crawlers. Interesting factoid, there was no earthworms on the North American continent before the English settlers came, and they brought them. People from Europe, people from Asia brought them in with them from different parts of the world. So they're not the greatest for our forest soils, contrary to popular belief. They're really good for your garden and your lawn because they're constantly eating and making the soil richer with their excrement. That's how they make it better. But in the forest, where the soils are very thin and fragile, they have a disruptive ability. So if you use worms, which is fine, bring them, just throw them in the water when you're done, let the fish eat them, or bring them back, put them on your lawn or in your compost pile. But if you put them in the forest, a lot of times where you're fishing, that can be bad. Even though probably now the cat's out of the bag in much of the United States, where they've pretty much got out. So a lot of people don't realize that they're actually a non-native, and they can be invasive in certain situations. Where the mealworms aren't. They're circumpolar. They're all around the planet. They live in the soil outside, under the leaf litter, that kind of thing. The other fabulous bait to use is little small minnow fish called shiners, and they're usually just golden shiners. You get them at a tackle store. If you have your own fishing license, which you need to have to fish, you can buy a little round bait trap and put it in a pond and put a little bread in it, and after a couple of days, you'll have a bunch of them. And very easy way to get bait, and you just hook them like this. You come under the dorsal fin or hook them in the mouth, cast them out, and usually catch bigger fish with shiners, because as fish start to get big, they look for a bigger meal. It's all about energy in, energy out, like it is for us. So they're looking for smaller fish to eat. So that can be really good for bigger bass and trout. And there's your standard live bait rig right there. So you have your fishing rod here on the shore. You have your line going to your bobber, your weight, and then about 2 or 3 feet of line swinging around here, coming up to your hook and your worm on it. I'd recommend putting the worm more, sewing it on and breaking it into pieces rather than I just did this for effect. But what's going to happen here is the fish is going to grab this and rip it right off the hook. If you have it kind of balled up and tighter on the hook, they'll actually grab the hook in the process of grabbing the bait, and hopefully you'll catch the fish. Lures, again, there's so many, and they catch way more people that fish. Anglers, we call them, females and males that fish, than they actually do fish. I give you a point. Great point. This little guy right here, frog, man, that looks like the best thing ever. I bought this a few years ago. I have never got a bite on that. This little lure right here, it's harder to see. It's clear. It's called a clear Zara spook. It's nondescript. I don't know what it's seeking to imitate, maybe a wounded bait fish. Hunk of plastic, clear. You throw that out in the water and twitch it a few times, and the fish go crazy for it, especially bass and bigger sunfish. Something that actually looks real, I haven't caught a fish on it. So that illustrates the point that a lot of times the lures catch people more than anglers, and the fishing industry loves that, because obviously if you have a tackle box that looked like that, a lot of trial and error happen, and probably only 25% of these work on any one time. These are your best category right here, the soft plastic baits. Unfortunately, they are plastic, but they're engineered so well to use. They're soft, so they feel to a fish just like something alive. They taste like it because they put salt in them. They sink and go through the water like something alive. and they move like something alive. So they're probably the ones, and they're the least expensive. If you're going to start with lures, I would start here, and the ones that look like worms would be as good a place as any to start. Where can you go fishing in Massachusetts? There's thousands of water bodies. The one you pass every day on your way to work or school, tiny little ponds can get some really huge fish. This is Forest Park, Barney Pond. We've done fishing events for the last few years. I don't know if you can fish it other than we stock it and do the program, but it's a tiny, tiny little drink of water, and there's tons of fish in this pond and some big fish too. And this is just a small little pond near where I live, out near the Quab and Hardwick Pond, that people pass by and go, oh my God, there's fish in that thing. So yeah, I mean, any little pond or drink of water can hold fish. Finding fish just comes down to looking for structure. Just like in real estate, they say location, location, location sells. With fishing, what catches is structure, structure, structure. So look for lily pads, look for big old trees falling down into the water, look for boulders, look for deep water. That passes as habitat as well. Somewhere the fish can go and hide from other fish. That they'll have certain comforts within that habitat. Don't just go to a beach area and cast out onto an open beach where there's no structure. You're not likely to catch much. What kind of fish should I go fishing for? I get that question all the time. I would say absolutely when you're just starting, don't be picky. Focus on just putting some live bait in the water and seeing what you can catch. You'll build confidence through that, and you'll learn the different species. And you might learn, if you're into eating fish, what tastes better to you and what you're going to target. And then as you get better, you can specifically target the individual species. When you're just starting, just go to a nice water body that's local to you and fish for whatever bites, build confidence from there. Start in lake and ponds. That's one of my biggest tips. If you start in rivers or the ocean, those are big moving waters, and moving water is inherently harder to fish because the fish move a lot more. They follow the bait moves around a lot more, especially in the oceans or big rivers, and the fish that were there one day aren't going to be there the next. Lakes and ponds are a lot more static. The fish hold in areas for weeks and months at a time. You can catch the same fish over and over. You catch big old smallmouth or largemouth bass under a boulder, alongside a boulder, or in a down tree. You can go back a month later and catch that same fish again. They pretty much stake out their claim and they hang in there, and they like that habitat type for those reasons. And it's all structure dependent too. So again, look for structure, those down trees, boulders, overhanging bushes, weedy banks. Don't just, like I say, sidle up to a beach that no one's swimming and cast. You might catch an occasional fish, but you're better off looking for structure. Fish during the warmer months, that's my other bigger tip. Fish right now. You fish from mid-May to October, the water temps are 60 and above. Most of the fish we have in this state are warm water fish, and they thrive when the water temperatures in that range. They're spawning when they're breeding and spawning and eating, and they're not thriving when the water temps get cold. They're kind of just existing until it warms up again. So I'd start in those times in lakes and ponds using live bait to build up your confidence.
Excellent.
This is one I get all the time, and this is for people that love to eat fish, and fish are delicious for a lot of reasons, saltwater and freshwater fish. Is it safe to eat the fish? So sure, like I say, high in omega-3 fatty acids, lean protein, part of any healthy diet. Even though they've done surveys now and they show in North America and in America specifically, United States, people are eating less and less fish, which is kind of sad. However, there is an advisory for a certain demographic that should kind of stay away from fish when they're developing them and they're young, and that is because of mercury, potential mercury contamination. So that's nursing mothers, pregnant women, and children under the age of 12. The only fish they should eat are the fish that we put in stock trout. We grow them kind of like a farm-raised fish. We grow them in a fish hatchery. We grow them to size very quickly, and we put them out every year, about 500,000 in the spring and another, 50 or 60,000 in the early fall. And those come back clean all the time when they're tested. So those, they're not really wild until they're in that water, and then once they're in there, they take on a wild nature and a wild flavor, and they're safer to eat. All others that aren't in that demographic can enjoy eating wild fish. I would just say in moderation, because that mercury is in the fish, but it really affects the young more than anything, is what studies show. And if you're going to eat fish, I wouldn't eat the huge ones. I wouldn't eat the big, the 5 and 6 pound fish. I would eat the ones that are just over legal size. And we'll walk through the laws in a second here. There aren't many laws for fishing in Massachusetts. We're lucky in that way, or you're lucky in that way. We don't, legislate water body by water body, where a lot of states really, by region, or certain water bodies have different size and catch limits, and we don't do that so much in Massachusetts. So I'll walk you through that really quick. But so for largemouth bass, for instance, 12 inches is the minimum size I would eat. A 12 to 15 inch largemouth, it's 3 or 4 years old. It hasn't lived in the wild that long. It's not going to accumulate much of any mercury, so I'd say that's a safer bet. But you'd want to consult the Department of Public Health, another sister agency of ours, and they do the tests throughout the state on water bodies, and they're always testing the fish. But that demographic in particular, the young children, you probably only want to eat stock trout if you're going to eat fish. So here's the law. Speaking of laws, this is the snapshot of our fishing seasons and creels. Creels just how many fish you can keep per day if you're out fishing. And you can see there's not many. You can fish January to December, 24/7, 365 days a year, all year long in most water bodies, with the exception of Quabbin and Wachusett Reservoir. There's a few smaller ones too that change regulations depending on the time of year. Basically, if you're in the Springfield area and you want to go down to, say, Water Shops Ponds or the Connecticut River or the Chicopee Reservoir, or any of those water bodies, you can do it all year long, anytime you want. And if you're fishing and those water bodies are stocked with trout, so this time of year, you can keep 8 trout if it's one of those rivers. Brooks, if you're fishing in, you can keep 8 after September to next year. So September 11th to March 31st, it drops down to 3 because we stock it in the spring. So we're looking to get people out, enjoy fishing, and take home their catch. And when we've recently stocked in the spring. So through the summer, the catch rates are a little higher, and then it drops down in the late fall and winter. Lakes, ponds, and major rivers, it's 3 fish all year. And that designation, so if you go onto our website, I'll show you that. The law book is right there. And those designations are all down below this little snapshot picture right here. And it shows you a little more detail. But if you're fishing for black bass, which is smallmouth or largemouth bass, all year long in any pond, you can only keep 5 fish per day, and they have to be a minimum of 12 inches. So you can see there isn't a lot, and this doesn't change water body by water body. If you go to Maine, which is a wonderful place to go fishing, or some of the other states like New York, they have region by region regulations. So you really got to know where you are and what water body you're in, and know the laws pertaining to that region and water body. So you're fortunate in Massachusetts. We're a very tiny agency with not a lot of manpower to be able to do this. So we get out and we're doing our research, but we don't feel the need to over-regulate these water bodies. So fish that have limits on them would include all the bass, the walleye, the big long fish, the pike and the pickerel. All of our trout, like I showed you, have some regulations on them. Lake trout and landlocked salmon, which you'd catch if you went to Quabbin and Wachusett reservoirs, have regulations. And then American shad, which you'd see in the Connecticut or Merrimack River, have 3 fish a day, no minimum size, but you can't keep more than 3 fish. So I can also take this PowerPoint and put it in a PDF and email it to Lindsay after, so you'll have that as well as a resource, folks. So just let Lindsay know about that, or maybe we can just do that as a matter of fact, so you'll have this right at home. And the fish that are no limits are the fish that you're likely to catch a lot of. So pumpkin seed, calico bass or black crappie, bluegill, perch, they're all really good eating fish. And you can keep as many per day, and there's no size limit on them. Doesn't mean you should go and fill a bucket up with 4-inch bluegills and bring them home, because there's still a delicate balance. I'd say that's where ethics come in. Leave some fish for other people to eat and to enjoy as well. But these fish are prolific. They're really good breeding fish. Generally, the fish on the lower part of the food chain are the bigger the fish, the fish that are considered game fish, there's less of, so they need some more regulations. And of course, there's catfish, and they're absolutely delicious, one of the best eating fish, and they're not regulated in terms of per day amounts or sizes. So let's look at anatomy quickly on a fish. We don't have too much time left in our official 1 hour. So just the dorsal fins, that gives the fish ability to move around. That's fish's arms and legs. They have all the same senses as we do, so they can see really well, hear really well, smell really well, taste really well, and feel. So they do that. Adapted to living in the water. They're a vertebrate animal like us. They happen to be cold-blooded. Adapted to living in the water. We're warm-blooded, adapted to living on the land. They're more primitive than us. They've been around a lot longer. They have a 6th sense, which is called the lateral line, which is a line of pores that runs down the side of the body, allows them to pick up vibrations within the water column. It allows smaller fish to stay in tight schools. It allows big predator fish to lie in wait and feel the vibrations from other fish coming by to grab and eat. All fish have this. It's a unique kind of a sixth sense that fish have. They also have a different mechanism to breathe. As you probably know, they utilize gills to take oxygen, the same element we breathe. They take it out of the water, we take it out of the air. It's never a good idea. If you hook a fish in the gills to try and extract that hook, it's best just to cut the line. And it's never a good idea to put your fingers up into a fish's gill area if you don't intend to keep the fish. All bets are off. If you're keeping the fish, you put the fish down humanely when you leave the water body and bring it home. But if you're going to catch and release the fish, don't stick your fingers up in the gill area because you could be imparting disease or infection into the fish. Internal anatomy, again, similar to us. They have a heart, liver, kidneys, stomach, intestines, backbone, spine, a brain. They are sentient beings. They can feel pain. They can, I always get that question, can fish feel pain? Well, probably not the same as we can. They have a less developed nervous system, but they can still feel pain. They have an awareness of pain. They certainly can build up stress, and stress is not a good thing for any vertebrate animal, anything on the planet that living to endure. So if you care about the fish and you're just going to catch and release, play them. Don't play them out. In other words, don't play them and then give them to your friend to keep playing. Get them to shore relatively quickly. Don't keep them out of the water too long. Release them unharmed to fight another day and to go off and give someone else enjoyment. If you're catching and keeping, be humane about the way you put the fish down. And there's two really good ways to do it. If you're catching and eating fish and you have to kill the fish before you leave the water body, it is the law. You can't transport live fish in this state. It's only two reasons to move fish, and that's to eat them. And if you catch a trophy like this one and you want to bring it to a fish artist known as a taxidermist to have them mount it, those are the only two reasons. But the fish still has to be dead when you leave the water body. The best way to do it is, I always get asked this question, is to take a really blunt object and hit the fish between the eyes on the top of the head. That's where their brain is, as you can see, is kind of right between their eyes on the top of their head, and that will just pretty much kill them. They'll have that chicken instinct where they'll flop around. They'll still appear to be alive, but they'll be dead. And or you can take a knife and put it right down between the eyes too and cut the brain, and that will kill the fish. But do that if you're going to keep and eat fish. That's your main way to do it. And then have ice and a cooler to keep the fish in until you get home. Plan for keeping the fish if you intend to eat them. Don't just let them flop around on the ground and suffocate for 20 minutes. And that's going to send a lot of adrenaline and things you don't want running through the fish too, and it'll make them less palatable. Kill them quickly, put them on ice, bring them home, and process them. And I wish we could show that. This is one of the last questions, and we already talked about it. Can I bring a fish that I caught in the wild home and put it in my tank or private pond? And no, it's against the law. And these laws were put into place to prevent nuisance species and disease. And you need only look at a couple of major examples in North America: Asian carp in the Mississippi drainage, the round gobies in the St. Lawrence system in Lake Ontario, and the northern snakehead in the Potomac. And they've wreaked all kinds of havoc on the native fish, so that can easily happen, so we don't move fish. Other than MassWildlife moving stock trout and groups helping us stock fish in known water bodies where we've stocked them for 100 years for your enjoyment. But yeah, you don't want to be moving fish around. It's actually against the law. We're winding it down now, folks, I promise. In terms of you folks tune in here, you're ethical people. That's the first step, right? You come to the right place to learn. So we're not going to belabor this. I always give this spiel in all of my, especially young folks classes. People should be very gentle on the land and on the resource you utilize to care about. And first and foremost, they don't litter, respect other people's privacy and space, practice safe fishing, know who's around you before you start throwing the line in, and take everything out with you. Have a license. If you're 15 and above, know and understand the regs that we kind of already went over. Release fish immediately if you don't intend to eat it or have it mounted by a taxidermist. Don't release unused bait fish. So if you do bring those fish with those shiners, don't just let them go when you're done fishing. You should land release those. Some bait shops will take them back. Not many will. If you got a pond, I guess, you could probably bring it back to that specific pond, but I would just recommend, if you're not going to use them again, just put them in your compost pile or release them on top of the ice if you're ice fishing, or land release them. where they won't do any harm to the water body. And if you have a mind to, you see someone breaking the law, not a bad idea to get information and call the environmental police.
When you're on Zoom, it requires, photographs you and puts you up.
And fishing line is the absolute worst litter. Here's two really sad examples. That's a peregrine falcon on the left. The mother thought the fishing line would be great to weave in the nest, and birds always do this, and it is a great weaving material. However, a lot of times the chicks get tangled up in it and die. It doesn't break like natural weaving materials like twine you'd find in the wild. So this poor little peregrine, which is an endangered species, suffered the ultimate pain in that. And then there was a robin on Indian Lake in Worcester. One of my instructors took a picture of this, was flying along the shore having a great day, got tangled up in the line and hung itself, sadly, in that line that just doesn't go away if you discard it. And this is what you'll typically see, a big old chunk of balled up fishing line that someone was too lazy to bring home with them when they got done fishing, or, they meant well and they didn't do it. But that's one of the worst things you can leave out in the out there. So I'm sorry I used up every ounce of the time. I would like to talk about a lot more. We're going to have a bunch of Zoom classes. We have another one coming up Wednesday, but we're going to schedule more. It's a 2-hour. You'll have some of this, but you'll have a lot more information. So you'd go to our website, and I can show you the website really quick and where to go if you want to hang in with me. I'll share that with you really fast. We'll try and share that with you really fast. I don't know if it's still up there. That went away on me. Okay, so what you want to do there is just, if you're here, you know how to go to MassWildlife. So you just Google MassWildlife, one word, and that's the first website will come up, and it'll right on the front of the page, you'll have our calendar page, and you'll just go hit that link, and it'll show you all of our upcoming events. Check on that periodically. And we're going to have Zoom fishing classes probably right into the fall, and there's just a lot beefier. We're going to have some specialty ones probably on trout fishing, bass fishing. So check those, and you'll have a lot more content, and we'll have a lot more time to go into depth. But also on that website, you can walk through where to go fishing, species to go after, buying your license, all that good stuff right there. On the face page, it has all these tabs that'll walk you to those links. So really easy peasy. If you folks navigated to here, you can easily find that. Just Google MassWildlife.
Thank you so much, Jim. This was so wonderful.
Thank you, Lindsay. Sorry I talked a little over. I was worried that was going to happen.
No, you got through a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Beatrice.
I have a question. We have those giant things that look like sea monsters. What are they called? Sturgeons.
In the Connecticut River, we do. Absolutely. They're very primitive. They're endangered. You can't target them. If you accidentally catch one, which some people do, you just got to release it immediately.
Okay, that's all you do. Release it immediately.
Yep, they're bottom feeding. Their mouths are kind of downward. So if you're fishing off the bottom, sometimes they'll pick up your line and run with it. There's not a ton of them. There's Atlantic sturgeon and short-nosed sturgeon. You might hook into one. When you catch them, just release it. They can be huge, though. They can be 3, 4, 5 feet long. Chances are, if you're using one of the kind of rods that I recommended, spinning a spin cast, you might just break your line anyway. They're so big and they're such good fighting fish. But if you happen to get a smaller one and land it, just release it. You can't miss it. They do look like dinosaurs. They have those big scutes on the back. They're long and skinny. Nothing like it at all. They're beautiful fish.
These little bumps going along, and I was on a pontoon boat, and I saw this thing go by. I'm like, what the hell was that?
Yeah. It looks like a little dragon going by, actually, the head of a dragon or something.
The guy next door to us, apparently he caught one, and he put it in a pond, and he got in big trouble. No, he got in trouble. They caught him.
Oh, okay. Goodness.
Well,
yeah, I mean, you don't know. It's just curious like that. Like those couple of goofballs 4 or 5 years ago it was on the news all over the country. They thought they found a new species off the New England shore while saltwater fish. They caught an ocean sunfish. It's a very common saltwater species, but they had no idea what it was. So they became famous for being clowns and acting like a couple of goofballs, not knowing what that fish was. So yeah, I understand it.
This is exciting because now I feel like I'm not going to go in and do something wrong.
Awesome, Beatrice.
I all your classes. Thank you a million. This was just.
I hope to see you again, Beatrice, and you too, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot, Jim. This was great.
Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks again, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Okay.
Thanks, Lindsay.
All
You
right.
guys have a good afternoon. Stay cool.
You
Yeah,
too.
you-
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
And you guys email me if you need anything. Lindsay's going to put my email on the link, and I'm happy to share this PowerPoint or anything else you need.
Well,
That's
thank you.
great. Yeah,
Well-
my email, I think I was in touch with all of you, but lgill@longmeadow.org, and I can share all of that.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Okay, thanks a lot, Lindsay. Thanks, Jim.
Take care. Thank you.